Hello, and thank you for joining today's webinar. We will be getting started in 1 minute. Hello, and thank you for joining today's webinar. We are ready to begin. Today's webinar is eligible for one contact hour. Sigma Theta Tau International Honor Society of Nursing is accredited as a provider of nursing continued professional development by the American Nurses Credentialing Center's Commission on Accreditation. The speakers and planning committee members have disclosed no conflicts of interest. To receive contact hours for this CPD session, participants are required to attend the webcast and complete the evaluation form, which will be emailed to all attendees. This webinar is being recorded and will be available via the Sigma repository within a few business days of recording. Following the presentation, we will have time for a question and answer session. You'll see on your GoToWebinar control panel that you can send a message through the question feature. This is where you can type in any question you'd like to pose to the presenters. Be sure to hit send so the message makes it to us. To practice using this feature, please submit the state or country you are from. On behalf of Sigma, we would like to thank our speakers for sharing their expertise with us today. Our speakers are Joanne Evans and Dr. Patricia Tabloski. Joanne Evans has been a nurse for over 50 years. She retired from her full-time position as Assistant Director of the Credentialing Knowledge Center at the American Nurses Credentialing Center in 2014. She is the owner of Healthy Nurses, Healthy Communities, and lectures nationally on plant-based nutrition. She travels the United States while continuing her professional and volunteer work. Dr. Patricia Tabloski is a nurse educator, clinician, and researcher who has devoted her entire career to the improvement in the care and quality of life of older adults across the entire spectrum of healthcare. Now let's go ahead and turn our presentation over to the speakers. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Joanne Evans, and Dr. Pat Tabloski is here with me, and we're really excited to talk with you about redefining retirement and planning for the life you want. It's definitely an exciting time. So the learning objectives for our presentation, the first one is the learners will be able to identify one theory of aging or retirement that may be relevant to you. And then the other one is learners will be able to identify two opportunities nurses may explore when you retire from full-time nursing. And next slide, Pat. So,
Right.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Joanne.
Okay, so we'll be talking about aging and retirement. And so for any of you who are not retired, we just want to tell you this is a really, really exciting time. If for men who retire at 65, they have another 21 years. And then for women who retire at 65, they have another 22 years. So you need to really think about what you're going to do with these 22 years. Are you going to continue working? Are you going to work part-time? What are the things you're going to become involved in? The way I have approached things through my whole life is whenever I'm doing something new, I decide that I'm going to start talking to everybody who has done this. I start reading everything I can find, and I start attending workshops on whatever the topic is. And so that's exactly how it went about with this one when it was time for me to even consider retiring. I was up at Pat's house on the Cape for a weekend, and I said, Pat, how do nurses do retirement? Like, what do you do? You know, I've done nursing my entire life, and I continue to want to do something with nurses. So what do we do? So it was from that conversation that we decided to interview 26 nurses, some within the United States and some internationally, on what they're doing in retirement. Sort of what are the challenges, what are the mistakes they've made, what's worked for them, what hasn't worked for them, what they wish they had done differently. And so we really want to thank those 26 nurses because they really did a phenomenal job at sharing their experiences, what worked, what were the heartaches, what were the things that just, you know, if they could do it over, they would do it over again. But on the other hand, what are all the things that they're doing that they had no idea were options for them? And it's really, really, they're having a great, great time. So we're going to be sharing some of their stories. during this presentation. So thanks for being here, and hope you gained quite a bit out of it. We are going to have some polls during it, so you'll be able to get some additional information and see the information from the polls.
Right. So Joanne is really right on when she's presenting these data. The average lifespan in the United States right now is about 78.9 years, so say 79 years, depending on your sex and your race and all of that. But we do know that on average, women live about 6 years longer than men. And if you're lucky enough to live to be 65, you have proven yourself biologically elite. And that elitism will allow 1% of us to live to be 100. And I don't know if any of you know Dr. Loretta Ford, who is the founding dean of the School of Nursing at the University of Rochester, but she just celebrated her 100th birthday. And all of us that were mentored by her sent her cards. And I understand she had a truck and a half load full of cars from all over the world because she touched so many lives. And I always say to the students, do you want to live to be 100? Raise your hand if you do. And a few do. And then I say, would you like to live to be 100 if you're 99 and doing fine? And then all the hands in the room go up. So we as nurses think not only about length of life, but we also think about quality of life, health and fitness, vigor. And, I think that we need to remind ourselves that just being in this place that we're in, with successful careers and with a work history and with a commitment, 40-year commitment, often even more, to helping others and to promoting quality of life and function in others is really a privileged place. And now it's our turn. It's our chance to focus on ourselves and to do some of the things that will make us happy. And that's totally fitting and appropriate. So, whoops, I think I went one too far. Okay, so here's a poll question. If you could answer this now. What are your thoughts about your own retirement? Are you thinking anytime now, within the next 5 years, in the distant future, or I don't know, I just really haven't thought about it? And make sure to hit the submit button, please. Okay, so we can see there, Joanne, we have 43% that say within the next 5 years, followed by any time now, in the distant future, and don't know. So basically, a good portion of the group is within the next 5 years or any time now. And you are very consistent with what's going on. If you are a baby boomer, that is, if you were born between 1964 and 1946, then you are not alone. There's 10,000 of us turning 65 every day. That means going on probably Social Security and Medicare. And there's 1 million nurses over the age of 50, which means about 1/3 of us will be retiring from the workforce within the next 10 to 15 years. And this is obviously going to have a huge implication for our healthcare system, especially now with people living longer and having higher expectations. Do you want to add anything, Joanne, before I go on?
No, except the don't know group, the 6%. I just want to reassure you, some nurses don't plan for retirement. Some do, but some don't. And then it happens. So if you don't know, it's understandable.
So just a few words about theory. I'm a college professor, so bear with me. I'll speak quickly, I promise. There are a couple of theories that really have guided retirement, thinking about retirement, principles of retirement. And of course, the one that I think we're all familiar with is the disengagement theory. This theory was developed by Cummings and Henry in 1964. And it really is a theory that the whole basis of retirement is based on, because what it says is it's when the older adult gets to a point where unable to work or perhaps not getting enjoyment and satisfaction from their employment, they should think about disengaging. It's good for society and it's good for the older person. They can step away, someone can come in and fill their shoes, it can be planned, it can be gradual, and this would give the older person time to think and to, do other things besides work. And that's really what retirement was based on. And somehow we came up with the magical number of 65 years. And that was kind of taken as the age where people should retire. Now we know that with Social Security being a little bit in the pinch money-wise, that the retirement age does vary. And the goal is to get it up a little bit. So it's gradually moving to 66 and 62.2 and all of that based on the age of the retiree, the year you were born. And if you're not sure about when your full retirement age is, you should go to socialsecurity.gov and check. And that would be when you would be able to be eligible for Social Security benefits and also for Medicare, which right now is still at 65. Then there's also activity theory, which really says healthy aging, healthy retirement, healthy life is based on doing the things that made you happy when you were younger and middle-aged. So continuing with the activities and really spending a lot of time just being yourself. So basically, not a lot of things change except for perhaps your lifestyle where you're working, you now have more time for yourself. And continuity talks about carrying on with your relationships and your goals. You may not be able to be busy 24 hours a day, but think about the things that make you happy and continue to do those things and modify if needed. So for instance, if you used to love downhill skiing and you really can't do that anymore, you might switch to cross country, or you might switch to snowshoeing or some other activity which would give you the same pleasure and reward, but perhaps not be at the same level of activity. So basically, all of these things are thought about, and the implication is the old model may not fit any one of us at any time. We may have our own model, we may have our own way of thinking, and this kind of fits in with Erickson, right, with his stages of development, where he talks about age 65 plus. Think of that, 65 plus. So thinking a 65-year-old is akin to an 80-year-old. That 15 years wasn't even teased out, where he talks about the last stage of human development being integrity versus despair. And people who despair have regrets, they look backwards, they're not at peace with themselves, rather than a person who says, look, I may not be perfect, I may not have done everything, I may have had a misstep here or there, but on the whole, I'm happy with who I am, I'm happy with where I am, and I am prepared to enjoy the last 25 or so years of my life. Anything you want to add, Joanne?
No, I think that covers it really well.
Okay.
So professional work post-retirement. We're going to start giving you some examples of some of the nurses we talked with and what they were doing. So one of the nurses we talked to was Taka, who's from Brazil, and she has a PhD in nursing and she has a law degree. And in Brazil, compulsory retirement is at 70. So it's definitely a different system than what we're used to. But she retired the first time when she was 49. And so she clearly had lots more energy to and things she wanted to do in nursing. So she started working at the International Council of Nurses, and then she worked there for 10 years, and then she retired for the second time at 59. So you might find that you have more than one retirement. So Taka had two. And so at this point, she's still an international speaker. She's on lots of boards. She is on doctoral committees. She mentors nurses. She said she will never stop working in nursing, that everything is for her revolves around nursing. And she actually, when it comes to relocating and where you're going to live, Taka decided she has an apartment in the city, but then she also has another apartment by the sea. So she goes back and forth, and she's going to keep both of them. Her goal at this point is to publish a book every year. So whether it's a book on the nursing history, on ethics, on policy, that's her goal. So she's definitely continuing to stay involved in nursing. And then another nurse, this is Marianne, and she's from Texas. And she essentially thought when she retired, she was just going to eat bonbons and read mystery novels. She really hadn't given it much thought. Now, she retired at age 82. But even at 82, bonbons were not in her future and mysteries were not in her future, although she is reading some of them. She just continued to lecture. She was mentoring faculty. She said it really is a really big adjustment. She actually had two floods. She's in Texas, and as you know, they've had a lot of flooding. So she's had two floods. So after the second flood, she decided that, okay, she's moving to a retirement place. Now, she had a really big house. So that whole emotional piece is a really big piece, because she said initially it was really hard to go from a large yard and a large house into a retirement center. But now she finds it's just absolutely wonderful, because she actually got a retirement center right near where her home was. So she didn't have to give up friends. She didn't have to give up colleagues. She didn't have to give up the stores she was using to. It was working out really well, and she likes all the services. She still continues to travel. She was in Russia. She went to China. And in the retirement center, now she's teaching mindfulness to the other people in the retirement center. So there are always opportunities for nurses to teach, and we're just born teachers. We're always going to find places that we can teach and share our knowledge. So those are two people under professional work and post-retirement.
Right. And I think that's the great thing about nursing. As Joanne said in her first example, we have a background in practice, of course, the direct care of patients, leadership, establishing systems where other nurses can care for patients and have positive outcomes, research, developing new theories, new practice patterns, coming up with evidence-based interventions. You know, back in the 60s, we had more money and more time to do things. Now our patients are sicker, they're more acute. We don't have time to waste on things that don't work. We really need to do the things that are going to be effective and not waste time or money, or even worse, disadvantage our patients and put them more at risk. So taking these skills from our careers and thinking about the next steps, things that we might do. And even for nurses who stay in practice, there are recommendations for employers that can make it more easy for older nurses to work. So it might be flexible shifts. It might be working in areas where there's not so much emphasis on physical care. I know at one of the hospitals in Boston, they were recruiting older nurses to work at the end of life in palliative care and hospice, because they had the strength and the experience to be able to care for seriously ill and dying patients. So there's just a lot of opportunities that can serve us well if we stay right within the field of nursing. And I don't know about you, but when I walk into a room for a meeting and I see some older nurses sitting around, I see some gray hair, I see some wrinkles, I think I'm comfortable because these are people who've paid their dues and have the perspective to guide some of the younger nurses that are coming in who perhaps have to learn the ropes. So that's the wonderful thing about nursing. One of the many wonderful things about nursing. So we have another poll question. Um, if you retire or when you retire, do you plan to work in nursing in a new role, perhaps part-time or a new focus after you retire? Yes, no, or you're not sure.
Remember to hit submit.
Okay, so Joanne, it looks like 44% say they want to stay in nursing post-retirement, 16% say no, and again, 40% say not sure.
So we had examples of all of them. We covered all the bases. There were some people who left nursing altogether, some people stayed, and some people did part-time.
Absolutely. Let's see if I can get there we go. So if you decide you want to do something more at your leisure, more community-based, you always would be sought after as a volunteer in a community activity. And the good news about being a volunteer is it not only benefits your community and your colleagues, but it benefits you as well. And there are tons of data that show that people that are altruistic, meaning they are committed to the health, the happiness, the quality of life of other human beings, benefit from it as well. So volunteers report less loneliness, less isolation, increased satisfaction, increased quality of life. And it's a great way to stay involved if you don't want to be committed to an employment situation where you're mandated to work a certain number of hours or various shifts or whatever. So being altruistic, which I think a lot of nurses are, and in our book, so many of our nurses, I think probably all of them said, I went into nursing because I wanted to help people. And they gave down to earth examples as to why. For some of them, it was an illness they had themselves, and they were exposed to a caring nurse who was able to help them through some difficult situations. In other situations, it was a sibling or a parent. Um, and one of our nurses said she was addicted to Cherry Ames books. She was reading all about nurses in fiction, and it somehow appeals to us. And we make the choice to go into nursing, and I think that feeling stays with you throughout your entire life to be able to help others and worry about others. There's also the concept of paying it forward, um, where we think about making the world a better place, not only for us, but for our children, for our grandchildren, for future generations of nurses, for future generations. And how do we do this? Well, as Joanne was saying with one of her examples, that one of our nurses is teaching a meditation to others that live in her housing development. Joanne herself has written a book on nutrition, and she lectures all over the country and the world about plant-based nutrition. Nurses get involved in fundraising, working for various causes, Doctors Without Borders, various clinics, whether they be local, national, international, writing op-eds for the newspaper. The newspapers love to have the input of nurses because they feel now that nurses are the ones, even more so than physicians in some circumstances, who really get to know the patient and who really can make a difference in that patient's recovery. And those of you that listened to Joe Biden's acceptance speech saw that he specifically thanked nurses and had a nurse sing the national anthem at his ceremony. So right now, we know nurses are held in good stead. And according to the Gallup poll, where they do the most trusted professions each and every year, I think nurses have been at the top of the list for the last 20 years. So we have a valuable voice. We have plenty of opportunity to verbalize our opinions and to speak up on various topics. I'm on 2 boards myself. One is an area agency on aging, where we work to provide home care to people who might have to be in nursing homes if they didn't have the care of a nurse or a nurse's aide in their home. And also, a lot of us do community speaking, either formally or informally. So any of these options are there. They're not exclusive. They can all be engaged in. They can be done along with part-time work or continued full-time work in nursing. And it's always there, and it always will make a difference. So anything you want to add, Joanne?
Yeah, one of our nurses said, as when you retire, you should speed date organizations, because when they find out you're a nurse and you've got time, everybody wants you. So make sure you really interview several organizations before you pick the one, and make sure it matches, because you're definitely well wanted out in the community. Okay, thanks.
I believe she was the one who said you should do speed dating.
Yes.
You should talk to, a lot of people who might want your effort, and don't make any commitments because you don't want to overcommit and then get in the rut where you can't meet your obligations.
Yeah.
So try to meet as many people as you can. Ask about the goals of their organization, the time commitment, what would happen if you wanted to travel, and then choose the organization that's really the best for you.
So 2 examples of family are in travel. The first one's Hector. Hector's from Texas, and he actually became a nurse by accident. He was an elevator operator in the hospital. And he said the only people not complaining about their jobs who seemed happy were nurses. So Hector went to nursing school. He got a bachelor's, he got a master's, and he got a PhD in nursing. And he focused primarily on curriculum and higher ed. He was actually the first Mexican American who received his doctorate in the United States. He was the director of nursing for 20 years at a school there, and then he retired at 55. And when he retired at 55, he still knew he had some things he wanted to do in nursing. So he's a guest lecturer. He was over in the Middle East. He was in Mexico. He was in Puerto Rico. He volunteers on all the local, national, and international organizations and on committees. And it's really interesting that he loves to write bylaws. I mean, that's just his thing. So he actually worked with the Texas Nurses Association and helped them do bylaws. He worked with AORN and helped them do bylaws. And then he did bylaws in his neighborhood association. And it's really interesting. He's lived in the same house for 50 years. And he said there is no way he's ever going to leave his house. That what he does is bring in different organizations or whatever he needs to hire, he'll bring them in. And when he got arthritis, he got a hot tub. And so he found that lots of his friends would come over to sit in the hot tub. So he then began to be a really, really good cook. So it was really wonderful when he could invite people over, they'd sit in the hot tub, and this is pre-COVID, and then would have dinner over. And the other thing he did that is his way of staying engaged with the younger community is he goes to happy hours every week. And when I asked him, I said, Hector, what would you recommend for nurses? He said, number one, avoid stress when they retire. You don't need any more stress. And then the other one who values family and travel a lot is actually me. I was working full-time at ANCC with Pat, and I knew I had checked with my financial advisor, and he said I could retire pretty much around 65, which is when I wanted to get Medicare. And so I wanted to retire full time, but I also really wanted to still working at ANCC. So I worked with a certification department, and I only worked 10 hours a week, which was absolutely perfect for me. And I did that for 2 years. And then the other thing I wanted to do is I wanted to travel. But I didn't want to do trips. I had already done that working with ANCC. I traveled in the US and internationally. I wanted to travel for long periods of time. So I decided it might be a good idea to get an RV. I had never owned an RV. I had never been in an RV. But somehow that just sort of came into my brain that was a good thing to do. So I did the RV experience the same way I do other new things in my life. I started going to workshops. I talked to other RVers. I ended up buying a pretty large RV out in Arkansas. I was living in Maryland at the time. And I bought this, and then I joined groups. And for 3 years, I just traveled around the country with different groups. Now, when I say I traveled 3 years, in 2019, I actually took 24 flights. So I was speaking at nursing conferences, I was doing lectures, I was visiting family and friends. So although I was in the RV, I wasn't in there all the time. And then another big thing was whether or not to sell my home. I had lived in the DC area for almost 50 years. So my whole network was there. I had some family there. I had really reservations about selling my house. But on the other hand, I didn't want to be out in the middle of California or Utah and have problems with the house. So I did decide to sell it. So selling is a big issue. But I'm glad I did. And then when I was in the RV, they actually have Habitat for Humanity for RVers. So I did some Habitat for Humanity. I knew nothing about building. But again, I learned, and it was somewhat like nursing, but not a lot, but there were some similarities. But I did some habitat in Texas and Colorado and West Virginia. And then professionally, like I said, I continue to write. I just had an article published in the Indiana Nurses Association on plant-based nutrition. I also teach with nursing NP programs, and I go in and I'm a guest lecturer. Thanks to Zoom, it's worked out really well. In this fall, I bought a condo a half a mile down from my daughter. I have 6 grandkids. 3 are on the West Coast, 2 are on the East Coast. I'm in the middle. And that's working pretty well. Now that I've been vaccinated, I've always gone for a month or 2 to help out my kids with the grandkids. And I had a granddaughter born New Year's Eve. So now that I'm vaccinated, I'm going to go out to California for a month or 2 and help them. Once they have to give up their 3 months and go back to work, that's when I usually come in for a month or 2. So there are just lots and lots of opportunities. Again, it's restricted a little bit with COVID. Well, it's restricted a lot, not a little bit, it's restricted a lot. But once you get vaccinated, there are more opportunities available. And once we get through COVID, there's still more opportunities. So for family and friends, you're engaging, you're re-engaging. And I don't believe in bucket lists, but for some people, they like bucket lists, so we'll have bucket lists. And Pat, I just realized we've already used a half an hour, so we're probably going to have to go faster.
Okay. So ask yourselves, have I not been able to travel because of my work responsibilities? Other things that get in your way are sometimes taking care of aging parents, or health issues of your own or of your partner or someone in your sphere. So if you have a chance to travel when you're healthy and you have time and you have the means to do it, it's probably a good idea. And as soon as things open up again, I think a lot of people will want to travel because we've been unable to. The picture on top is from the Great Wall of China, which is where I was 2 summers ago, lecturing to Chinese nurses about end-of-life care. So you don't want to...
The one below, it's 2 years ago when I got together with college friends for our 70th birthday.
Right. That's talking about pent-up travel.
Yeah.
But, if you do get the opportunity, and if you sometimes people lose their travel partner through illness or unfortunately death. So there are AARP and some of the other organizations, the Savvy Senior, have group travel for singles. So you can be with a group and you can have, companionship and so forth, but still travel on your own, which is appealing to a lot of people as well. So think about travel, think about if you have places you want to see, and if you have the opportunity to do it soon and you have the means, please do. So another poll question is taking a special long-awaited trip something you would like to do with or without your family. A lot of people in our book said they would like to take a vacation without an end date. They would just like to go somewhere and stay as long as it seemed fun and then go on to the next place. If that appeals to you, would you want to do it alone or with your family? So make sure to hit submit. Okay, so 88% said yes. Wow. And 11% said not sure. So obviously, if you're in that group for deferred travel, get your brochures, get your guidebooks, and get your plans in order so that when things open up, we'll be able to do that. Okay, so Joanne said we're taking too much time. We'll go a little faster. We talked about new ventures and risk taking. Some of our nurses wanted to start businesses. They wanted to start a new venture. It's a little bit risky. Another wanted to take up an instrument. One said that they had played it as a child, but they had forgotten and they wanted to get back. Another one said they wanted to take it up. And all of these things that challenge you and urge you to learn new things are great for your brain, because a lot of the things that we do are repetitious, right? So we say, oh, we do the daily crossword. Well, doing the daily crossword is good, but how about doing the daily crossword one day and Sudoku the next? Like mixing it up a little, challenging your brain. You're always learning and growing and developing. Another one took some college courses, and a lot of the universities and community colleges in your area might offer courses for seniors or continuing ed courses. I know at Boston College, if you live in the Newton area, you're a neighbor and you want to take a course, you can sit in on it. And you can take notes and interact with the other students and so forth. One of our subjects got a divorce. She said for years her work and his work kept them compatible. They didn't spend that much time together, but after retirement, they found out they weren't compatible, and they really had a different lifestyle and different goals. So they were divorced. They remained friends. They're travel partners. They travel together, but they no longer live together. So this is where you have the time, the energy, and the effort to get to know yourself again. You knew yourself when you were 20. You knew yourself when you were 21. You had goals, you had dreams, you had ambitions. You had to choose what school you wanted to go to, what person you wanted to perhaps mate with and spend your life with. And then life happened. So this is your chance to do that again. One of our nurses said that it's not retiring, it's rewiring. It's still me, but it's new connections, it's new opportunities, it's a new venture. So anything you want to add, Joanne?
No, I started the business Healthy Nurses, Healthy Communities, and it's just been really fun. I've had a good time with it. But it was chancy, it's like any business, it's chancy.
Yeah, especially now with the pandemic, but
Yeah.
hopefully in the long run. Okay.
I think we missed one, Pat. There's the slide on Native American. Oh, if not, let me just tell you about one other before we go into this slide. There was one other nurse who, remember Pat was talking about Loretta Ford? Well, Marcella was 100 last year. So this year she's 101. And she, at 100, received the award from the National Congress on American Indians. She actually became a nurse in 1942 and went over to World War II and was in the Battle of the Bulge. And when she came back to the U.S. as a Native American, there was lots and lots of discrimination. But she made her way and has been very, very successful. And she retired at the age of 70. And I asked her, I said, what did you think you were going to do? Because she had been retired. She had been the director of the Indian Health Services. And she said, Joanne, I think I'm just going to sit. I'm tired. I'm just going to sit in a rocking chair and knit and crochet. And I talked to her the following year. The governor of South Dakota had asked her to be on the mental health advisory panel. So she said yes to that. She said yes to ARP, and she was working on legislative issues. At 93, she climbed Bear Butte, which is a very sacred mountain for the Native American community. At 95, remember all the pipeline protests? She was there 5 times at age 95. And then at 97, when I talked to her, she was still driving. And she was headed over to Scotland to talk about her World War II experiences. So when you think that, 70, 80, 90 is old, remember that there's certain nurses who are hitting 100 and she's now 101. So it really doesn't end. You continue planning and coming up with things you want to do because you really do. As long as you're healthy and you have the finances, there are lots and lots of opportunities. Okay, Pat, now we can move on to the other one.
Okay. So decide on an age you'd like to retire. And you don't have to be specific, but you could say, I think I'd benefit from an early retirement, or I want to work a little longer because I'm, helping a grandchild through college or something like that. Do you want to stay in place or relocate?
Can I say one more thing on the aging thing? Remember, on the age, there are a lot of emotional issues because you're giving up your title, you're giving up your certification. You get lots of accolades of being from a nurse, whether you're getting accolades from your patients or from your administrative position. You're giving up a lot of accolades. So just be cognizant of that. And one of the things, several of the nurses mentioned this, if you're married or with a partner or living with someone on a regular basis, have them retire first and let them sort of figure out what their patterns are and what their interests are so they have independent activities for when you retire. If you retire first, there's sometimes some problems. But if they retire first, it tends to go better. So I would just suggest that one.
Yeah, and what Joanne was saying is so true, that there are losses that go along with retirement. So, for instance, you do lose your title, right? You're no longer in that role. There can be a loss of income. Even if you've saved and you have a nest egg, then that's probably you're going to have to switch from saving to spending, which is a little scary for some people. Loss of daily interaction with valued colleagues, the socialization, the going out to lunch, the meeting after work, and loss in, if this is something you really enjoyed doing, loss of that activity which brought purpose to your life. So the gains are you get more time for yourself, you can re-engage with family and friends, you can travel, you can volunteer, you can engage in new professional ventures. So all of those things go into your thinking. Stay in place or relocate. Many people do a gradual relocation. If you live in the north, you might go to Florida for 3 or 4 or 5 months or some warm climate, and then come back to your home, be like a snowbird. Or do you want to just pull the Band-Aid off and leave a big house? There's a lot now of senior living, which is like a community where all of the bedrooms are on the first floor, and people share services like in a condo development, landscaping, and so forth. Always consult with a financial planner. This should be done fairly early in your work career, and make sure to get a reputable one, someone who has a fiduciary relationship, meaning they put your interests ahead of their own. There's a lot of information out on the web, and in our book, we have resources for financial planning. Current health status, evaluate your health status. And many of our nurses, I would say over 50%, said they are healthier now than when they were working. They have more time to buy healthy food, to cook it, to try new recipes, to exercise, and less binge eating and all of that. So try to get yourself as healthy as possible, because when you go into retirement, if you're healthier, then of course that means you're more functional, you can do more things, and you can be happier in the long run. And evaluate your hobbies. Did you used to enjoy knitting or cooking, or whatever it may be? Is it possible that you can pick this up again?
Back on financial, they say just average about 70% of your pre-retirement is what you're going to need to maintain current lifestyle. So figure out about 70%. And also remember the 4% rule, that 4% is what you're going to take out of your IRA so that you can continue living a long life. Well, one of the nurses had not heard about 4% rule. So make sure you're aware of the 4% rule.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So travel, I think we've already talked about travel. If you're going to go on a long trip with someone you're not really familiar with, I would suggest taking a weekend trip first, just for compatibility. And they say the way to really get to know someone is to travel with them for 2 weeks. And that sometimes can be a little shocking to people, but nonetheless, if there's someone you're compatible with, go for it. Friends, friends, and more friends. I can't emphasize this enough. This was the subject of my doctoral dissertation at the University of Rochester. The biggest predictor of health and happiness as you get older is having a trusted friend you can trust and confide in. Someone you can call at 2 a.m. and complain, and all is well. Someone who accepts you for what you are. So when I was a Girl Scout, I learned the song, "Make new friends, but keep the old. One is silver and the other's gold." And that is absolutely true. So reconnect with your old friends, make new friends, and the more socially engaged you can be, the better. Connect to the universe. So I have a short quote here from Dr. Chopra, who says, feel what you feel, don't use denial as a defense. Be open to your body. When your body speaks, are you listening? So if you've had headaches, if you've had fatigue, if you've had malaise, what is your body trying to tell you? And how can you connect to the universe through exercise, through meditation? How can you forgive yourself, forgive others, and move forward with a clear conscience and an accepting feeling about life? Clutter, clutter, and more clutter. Get rid of the clutter if you can. This is a whole science now. You can hire people to come in, and if there are pieces you really love and you can't live without, keep them. Perhaps donate others or go to consignment shop. But try to free yourself up. And it's also, I think, a benefit to your children or your spouse or whoever comes behind you, not to have to deal with all of the clutter. So make the decisions for yourself, if possible.
And be assured your kids don't want your clutter. Almost everyone said their kids didn't want it. So the things you think are extremely valuable, talk with your kids now, because they're not interested. Now, maybe they're grandkids, but your kids are not interested.
Right. And we had someone in our book who gave a valuable piece of her possessions to her children for Christmas, one piece each year. And sometimes the children were like, okay, great, Mom, thanks. But the things that were so popular for us, like China serving for 12 and crystal and all that, it's a different lifestyle now. So it's hard. I know, I'm there, but do your best. And forgiveness that we've talked about, and avoiding stress, dealing with stress in a positive and healthy manner.
So the only other one on the universe, a lot of people became more spiritual. And they started looking different spiritual alternatives, and some very different from what they grew up in. But for many, many people, that's when they started looking at more of the spiritual aspects of life. So, okay. Looking back, having it all.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
guess the slide we were looking for, Joanne.
yeah. So that was the one. Oh, I know. It was Robert Piedmont. Let me see. I've got Robert here.
And we did try to get some diversity in our book, so we have men and women, and we have people from international people, and I don't want to steal your thunder, but a lot of the men said it was hard going into nursing at that time because there weren't many men. I think now in our undergraduate programs, there's about 11% men, but it wasn't that way 40 years ago.
No, in
And
fact, Robert was one of our nurses who said that he couldn't get into nursing school because of the discrimination, and that he found one of his friends finally found a nursing school that he could get into, and so he did get into that nursing school, and he got his bachelor's. He actually got 2 masters. Once he got through the bachelor's, he didn't have any trouble with master's or PhD program, but that bachelor's was a real problem. And he went into policy development and leadership, and he worked for ANA when it was in New York. And then some of you remember it being in Kansas City, and then it moved to Silver Spring, Maryland. He retired at 62 because he thought he had done everything he wanted, but he still wanted to volunteer. And since of his background about policy, he was over in Vietnam, and he worked with the Vietnam Nurses Association. And he loves to travel, so he's been sick to the 6 continents out of the 7. He likes going to the theater, and when it came time to move, he had always lived in New York City. He wanted to go to a retirement community, which he went to in Massachusetts, and he was very concerned about getting isolated from his friends. He said that didn't happen at all. His friends all traveled, he connected with them, and he made new friends. So the retirement was really an incredible time for him.
so men face discrimination because they were seen as non-empathetic, or med school dropouts, or just really there to be heavy lifters when you had to transport a patient or something like that. So hopefully we're seeing less of that. I know with the pandemic, they've been interviewing a lot of nurses on television, and I've seen quite a few male nurses and many, many female doctors. So hopefully those sexual stereotypes are dissolving, and people will be able to choose the careers that they like and deserve. So in summary, I guess, Joanne, you and I can both speak to this. I think we have a few minutes.
And we want to get questions.
Think of retirement as an important time in your life, not an end, not a period of decline and loneliness and decrepitude and all of those sorts of things, but a good chunk, up to a 25-year chunk of your life, which you've worked for, which you've earned, and which you deserve. Prepare where you can, obviously financial preparation, but what about the rest of it? Some people plan more for a 2-week vacation than they do for a retirement. And the day they wake up and they don't have work or they don't have a commitment, they're like, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? You don't want to be in that situation. You want to have a bridge. You want to have a transition. You want to have a thoughtful progression. Be aware of all your options, make the most of it, and best of all, have fun.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yes, we do. What is a good length of time to give my retirement notice? My work only requires 2 weeks, but I feel like that isn't enough time to transition out.
I guess I can say that I actually gave them 6 months. I was in a leader position, and I had been sort of training someone. So I think it really depends on your organization and your relationship with people. For me, I was working with friends. So I wanted to give them as much notice as I could. So that's how I deal with it. But I know other people have done usually 30 days. Might be more than norm, but I think again it depends on how long you've been in your organization, your relationships, what you plan to do. Pat?
And the degree of specialty of your work. So
Yeah.
if you're in a highly specialized situation like an ICU, obviously it takes about $40,000 to hire and orient a nurse to walk into an ICU setting. So sometimes, depending on where you live, there are nursing shortages. It takes a while to recruit. And I would say in general, the longer the better. You don't want to make it too long because then, it kind of drags on. But if you can give as much notice as possible, I think your colleagues will be thankful that you've done that, and you'll feel good about that too. And also, you might be able to negotiate a transition. For instance, if you're in a specialized setting, you might say, "I'd like to retire within the next 6 months. When you hire the new person, how about I work 2 months full time and then we do a split 50-50, and then, I phase myself out." That can, allow you to be a mentor during that transition period.
Yeah. I went to another department at ANCC and I worked 10 hours for them and they knew I was retiring. So we were able to work it out really well. Another question?
How do you maintain relevancy and credibility after retirement?
Several of our nurses continue to read nursing journals. I continue to keep up. I belong to 2 state nurses associations. I write in journals. I read lots of information coming from nursing journals. My specialty is mental health and plant-based nutrition, so I belong to several organizations that I joined, and I'm in charge of different aspects of those organizations. So that's how I stay relevant.
Right. And also sometimes your professional conferences will have discounted registration for retirees. And of course, this year everything's been virtual, so it's been very easy for people to attend. Even people that don't normally travel have been able to attend. And there's lots of free webinars and things that you can do. Really, I think you're not going to be able to help yourself. You're going to be able to you just want to keep up with what's going on, and read and think as much as possible. And you can also join, special groups like in your community. We have a group here because I live in an area where we have some history. We have the Alcott Museum, and they have readings there, and the Hawthorne House, and we have book clubs. And it really, I think you'll be amazed that there are so many options for people that want to stay relevant and informed.
How do you find international opportunities and how do you connect with others from different countries?
There's actually, we have a whole list of resources that Sigma is going to be putting out attached to this webinar, and you'll get those in a couple days. But if you go on the website, there are actually several organizations. I've done medical missions, the Dominican Republic and Ecuador. There are lots of churches that do, if you want to do medical missions. I've been with Rhodes Scholar, and I was down in Costa Rica. There's actually quite a bit if you want to do volunteering. You also can check some of the nursing schools. A lot of the nursing schools are doing programs, and you can check with them about volunteering and going down with a group, whether it's to Africa or South America. Again, once the pandemic's open, but there are actually quite a few options if you want to do some international work.
Mm-hmm. Right. Doctors Without Borders, the Red Cross. And also don't neglect national work as well. We have people right here in the United States that can benefit from nursing interventions and nursing clinics and screening clinics. In my community here, we run a free clinic at the local temple every other Tuesday night. And we do blood pressure screenings, and we make referrals to people that need follow-up care. So there's lots of opportunities to keep your clinical skills. And I urge everybody to keep their licenses up, so that you can volunteer as a nurse rather than an informed volunteer. You can have that nursing credential, and be able to help with vaccination clinics. And right now they're begging retired nurses to come back and help distribute the vaccine. And we're hoping to be able to move forward on that in a big way.
Check with American Red Cross, because I also did some volunteer work for them, and they have openings and options too.
We
Another
have one
question?
last we have one last question. How do I connect
Okay.
with other nurse leaders, nurse writers, or nurse entrepreneurs?
Lots nurse leaders. I would, if you're in any organization, you can identify with the nurse leaders and just contact them. You got their emails. Tell them what you're interested in doing. But being part of committees is really, really helpful. So whatever. I mean, my background again is in mental health, so I belong to the American Psychiatric Nurses Association, and I've done workshops for them. I've connected with them on a regular basis. I do presentations for them. So whatever your specialization is, make sure you're connected with all the groups in both nationally and locally in that area.
Mhm.
Does
So
it-
I'm a member of big nursing organizations like the American Nurses Association and also specialty organizations, which is where you can really connect with people who have the same passion you have. So I'm a member of the Gerontological Nursing Association and the Hospice and Palliative Care Nursing Organization. So this is where you can go to conferences either virtually or you can connect with other people. You can follow up with emails, and it's just a great way to really get with others who believe in the things you believe in.
Also write. I mean, to write articles. I've done that for almost every organization I've been in. Write articles, volunteer if there's a conference coming up and it's in person, volunteer to help. That's another way of really getting connected with the inside people.
Mhm.
Does that help?
Yes. Thank you so much to our presenters today for all this great information. Sigma is grateful that you took the time to share with this audience, and we look forward to hearing more from you in the future. Be sure to check out Sigma's upcoming webinars, podcasts, and resources to support you and your colleagues at sigmanursing.org. Also, previously recorded webinars and podcasts are freely available on the repository. Thank you for joining us and have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you.